Is this the first categorical proof?
Yes.
The Sudanese government has an arsenal of Chinese weapons, but nobody's ever proven that new Chinese military equipment has ended up in Darfur in breach of a UN arms embargo until now.
Is this the first categorical proof?
Yes.
The countdown to the Olympics in China has begun, with officials there braced for protests on Tibet and human rights. But it's claims that China has put its thirst for oil ahead of the lives of Africans that we focus on tonight. 130 athletes, some of them headed for Beijing, have signed a letter calling for a truce in Darfur. Steven Spielberg pulled out of advising the Games because he said his conscience would not allow it. The connection? Chinese weapons fueling a vicious conflict the world can't seem to stop.
Through the wilds of Chad in North Africa, back towards the land of killings, Darfur. For 5 years, these deserts have been stained by the worst atrocities known to man. But that's changed nothing. We're driving along Darfur's border, and last night we heard heavy fighting just about 10 miles away. I was here right at the start of the conflict when the world had barely heard of Darfur, but now it's been called a genocide. The atrocities have been catalogued and exposed. So I never would have imagined I'd be here 5 years later saying the killings are still going on, but they are, and the death toll has now risen to an estimated 300,000 people. This is what Darfur looks like now. Hundreds of villages have been burnt across a vast area, all but erased from the face of the earth. The government of Sudan has done this, together with the Arab Janjaweed militia it uses to help fight this dirty war. Sudan's Arab-dominated government is based in Khartoum. Darfur, largely made up of black Africans, lies hundreds of miles away in Sudan's west. Plagued by poverty, Darfur's people have long felt marginalized. 5 years ago, they rose up and rebelled. The government responded ferociously. At the height of it, 10,000 people were dying a month, and it's not over yet. In February this year, this is what the government did to a whole section of West Darfur. The village that stood here was called Gosmino. These were the homes of 3,000 people. Air power and ground forces obliterated the place. This was not like the sporadic fighting more often seen now. This onslaught was ominously similar to the attacks at the start of this conflict. The attacks that led America to call this a genocide against black Africans. But much of the military hardware that's devastating Darfur is not Sudanese. So who is arming the killers? Sudan's government publicly paraded its military might in December. We had these pictures analyzed. These are T-96 Chinese battle tanks.
China is a hugely significant supplier of small arms and light weapons, as well as medium to heavy equipment right across the range up to aircraft.
And another like it in the same battle.
Tura Masik, a local GEM commander, showed us a model 2005 Dongfeng military truck produced in China. A truck from a batch the UN has been trying to find here for years. We verified that it had indeed been captured from government forces through testimony. The rebels had taken off its gun to use it for themselves.
The Sudanese army put their heavy guns on the Dongfeng trucks.
The truck's markings showed clearly it was manufactured in July 2005, after the current UN arms embargo was imposed. The rebels had earlier taken our camera and filmed another Dongfeng truck they said they'd captured. It had the same markings. It too was mounted with an anti-aircraft gun, this one Chinese. These guns can fire high-caliber shells designed to cut through armor. They've been used here as instruments of mass burning. They cause terrible wounds. From detailed research, we're almost certain that the truck we found played a key part in an attack last December on a town called Surba. We traveled to a distant part of eastern Chad. This town is called Birak. Amongst thousands of refugees, we tracked down witnesses who had seen the Dongfeng truck as it moved in on Surba, firing its gun.
It goes boo 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 like that. The sound, it's like rain. Boo 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 like that.
Eyewitnesses saw one hut take a direct hit from the truck's gun. An intense wave of heat instantly set all the huts around up in flames.
We saw a Dongfeng truck. Its gun started firing. People began screaming. The shooting continued until the houses were burning. The woman was burned on her legs. Her body had a bullet hole that went from her chest to her back.
One woman was burnt alive. 2 others were badly disfigured by their wounds. These Dongfeng military trucks arrived in Port Sudan straight from the factory in China in August 2005. The gun on the truck we filmed was mounted later. A UN panel of arms experts carefully pieced together the story. There were 212 Dongfeng trucks in the shipment. Since 2005, the UN's efforts to track these trucks down in Darfur have been blocked. E.J. Hogendorm was on the UN panel that tried to find them.
We had no specific access to Government of Sudan Army stores. We were not allowed to take down factory codes or model numbers or registration numbers, etc., to verify these kinds of things.
We showed him our evidence.
This is a close-up of the model number on the truck. I'd like you to compare that to the number in your UN report. Can you verify that this is the same? This is from the same batch of trucks, that these are the trucks you were looking for?
That it's the same batch, or it's a truck from the same batch.
So what does this say to you?
What it certainly indicates is that those trucks were imported after the imposition of the arms embargo, which forbids those kinds of transfers.
So is this the first categorical proof that you've seen that Chinese military equipment has gone into Darfur since the arms embargo was put in place?
Yes.
It says it's told Sudan's government that Chinese weapons must not be used in Darfur. But Sudan's government openly says it'll send military equipment where it likes. Equipment that's used in mass killings. Legally, we were told China is not off the hook.
It's an empty measure to take the assurances from a partner who clearly has no intention of abiding by the resolution.
Over the years of Darfur's festering crisis, its civilians have been systematically hunted. Not just from the ground, but from the air.
Villagers also talk about fighter jets that streak through, firing their weapons with devastating precision. No one has ever firmly established who supplies and maintains the fighter jets that are used in Darfur, but we've unearthed new evidence.
The rebels took our team deeper inside the Jebel Moon Mountains. Thousands of people fled into these hills seeking refuge during the government onslaught in early February. They've scattered now. Their attackers pursued them here. This place is called Bebe. On February 19th, the government used fighter jets here. The gouged earth evidence of the aerial bombing. Our team found large pieces of shrapnel spread out across the area. Kaltam Abakar Mohammed's house was burnt down last year. She took refuge in Bebe. That February morning, she heard the fighting. She grabbed her 7 children and ran. A terrible screeching sound tore overhead.
Something that looked like an eagle came towards us.
The fighter jet unleashed 2 bombs. In front of her, 3 of her children were cut to pieces. One of her girls was 5. Her boy was 8.
My daughter and son were hit in the back of the head. One girl was hit in the neck. Her head was cut off. Another was hit in the back and through her breast.
We wanted to find out which type of aircraft had killed Kaltam's children. We got access to this satellite image of Nyala Airport in South Darfur. It was taken on June 18th. These are Chinese Fantan fighter jets, or A-5s. Panorama visited Nyala and identified them on the ground. With confidential military assistance, we've established that Fantans were flying from here regularly in February. They were taking off on missions and heading west. Bebe lies in the west. Our investigations indicate that these are the only type of fighter jets that have been based in Darfur in the last 7 months. It's believed the Fantans came to Sudan before the arms embargo was imposed. But a series of photos of the Fantans we've acquired, these were taken last year, show them in Darfur being serviced. The embargo prohibits foreign servicing. We tracked down Chris Dietrich, another former member of a UN panel of experts. He spent months investigating these planes in Darfur last year.
The aircraft will be sold as part of a larger package, and the more profitable part of the package usually is the training of air crews and the training of maintenance personnel, as well as all associated spare parts.
Does Sudan have the capability to service these aircraft itself?
It has the capability to perform light servicing, but once you start dealing with the avionics, then you need foreign trained technicians. And China actually having sold these aircraft to Sudan, then you could presume that any technicians would indeed be part of that contract and from China.
We were told by a military source we can't name that these Fantan aircraft looked like they'd been serviced in the last few weeks. These are called K-8s. They too are Chinese aircraft. They were imported to Khartoum in 2006 as the war in Darfur was in full swing. They're designed to train fighter pilots. We've been told by our military source that China is currently training Sudan's Fantan pilots. The second source, well placed within the UN, backed this up.
This is the typical trainer. Once you graduate from this, you can fly the Fantan.
We've been very reliably told that Sudanese pilots are being trained by China. Does that match with what you were able to find out?
Absolutely. Any sale of aircraft or any military equipment of this capacity, you would have to have the sale involve trainers.
The terms of the embargo cover not only just the supply of weapons, military vehicles, paramilitary equipment, it also covers training, any technical assistance. So training of pilots obviously falls within the scope of the embargo.
China's stated position is that it abides strictly by international arms embargoes. Kaltam's family is still reeling from the attack. Her grandson, Hamza, 19 months old, has a piece of shrapnel in his forehead. He's been screaming with pain. In his crying, he calls out for his mother. But she was killed too. Kaltam's 13-year-old Hawa saw her siblings being blown to pieces. She rarely speaks now. China is not the only country responsible for arming Sudan's government. These are Russian Mi-24 helicopters being used in Darfur. China says it's only responsible for a small part of Sudan's arms imports, but it provides almost 70% of Sudan's small arms alone. The evidence we've uncovered about China may well be the tip of the iceberg. Tonight, President Omar al-Bashir stands accused by the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court of 10 counts of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, of masterminding a campaign of rape and killing against Darfur's black Africans. And this is the man China is backing. China's President Hu Jintao had gifts for President Bashir when he came to Sudan last February. He wrote off debt and gave him millions of pounds for a new presidential palace. China says Darfur's problems are economic and what Sudan needs is business. China has a cozy relationship with a government accused of genocide. And the reason is oil. Sudan has 5 billion barrels of known oil reserves, and most of Sudan's oil goes to China. China has a great thirst for oil, and it's not just plentiful here, China buys it cheap.
China is the most significant foreign oil partner in Sudan's oil industry. Today, Sudan does supply roughly 7% of China's total oil imports. It also has a majority share in Block 6, which is an oil block that extends into southern Darfur.
Our team decided to try to get to Adila in Block 6. It took days. This bleak part of Darfur is remote and dangerous, and it's arid. This place is plagued by both war and drought. And here, smack on top of China's oil wealth, where a Chinese company, one of the richest in the world, is pumping oil, we found children starving. Magbula, 9 months old, has lost 1/6 of her body weight in a week. She's severely malnourished, battling pneumonia. Her mother looks on. A staggering 1/3 of small children here are malnourished, many severely. And malnutrition rates here are set to soar. Peacekeeping force here, but there isn't. Sudan doesn't want one, and China has helped Sudan get its way on the world stage.
Through long discussions here at the UN, we've managed to piece together the story of how China has backed Sudan's government to the hilt. Over the last 4 years, they've helped weaken the UN arms embargo. They've helped prevent the threat of sanctions on the Sudanese government. And China has helped get a UN peacekeeping force into Darfur that's effectively crippled.
Senior diplomats we spoke to here at the UN in New York, who wouldn't go on camera, said Sudan's government, with the help of its allies, primarily China, scuppered a plan for a stronger UN force in Darfur. A force that might have deployed more than a year ago.
One of the enablers of Sudan's being able to act so in defiance of the UN has been China. At the UN, China is Sudan's patron, and it's Sudan's political trump card. China has basically been the stumbling block to these resolutions. It has weakened them, threatened a veto. China has a veto in the Security Council.
Our team went on patrol with the UN force that's now in Darfur to see the effect this has had on the ground. China helped get this force here and was widely praised for it. After all the delays, Western countries were relieved a UN force was finally deploying at all. But China had helped lobby for a force which suited Sudan's government, a force which was deeply compromised. Panorama got all the way to Surba, the very town where the Chinese truck's gun had opened fire and burnt the woman alive in December. This UN force could do little to protect the civilians in this area during the recent onslaught. It doesn't have enough men, vehicles, or equipment. And it can't do much to protect civilians now either. Sudan's government runs the area. Most people were too terrified to speak to our team, but one person risked it.
Men don't go out at all. Some of the women can go out, but if they do, they'll get beaten and raped. Yes, that's the situation, so we don't go out. These are the Janjaweed who are doing this. The Janjaweed are all over this area.
As Panorama was about to leave the town, Janjaweed militia moved menacingly right past our camera. These ruthless government-backed militia carry out some of the worst atrocities, right under the noses of the UN. Sudan accepted this UN force on the condition that it would be predominantly African. China helped push for this, and that condition is precisely what has undermined it.
Sudan pushed for that language, and China pushed for it as well, because Sudan had been able to manipulate the African Union force because they were from African countries.
Now the head of UN peacekeeping can't get enough troops for this beleaguered force, and it's meant to be the biggest peacekeeping force in the world. To him, the problem is clear.
That force, operationally and politically, would be much stronger if it represented the whole world. And for that, you need a range of troop contributors that you do not have in Africa. I find it enormously frustrating that there are these immense expectations vis-à-vis the United Nations, and we are not in a position to deliver on those expectations. We can make some difference, but certainly not the difference that we are expected to make.
You'll soon be leaving your job. Is it a personal disappointment to you that this mission might go down in history as a great failure?
Yes, and actually I warned them, and I gave public warnings of that before the deployment was happening. I think it would be a tragedy for the people of Darfur. I think it would be a tragedy for peacekeeping too.
This is one of Darfur's immense camps for the displaced. It's called Kalma. The UN force comes here, but it doesn't make much difference. The camp's a sprawling mess, home to around 100,000 people. The rebels have a strong presence here, and so the government has little mercy. They stop any new arrivals registering for food aid. But Janjaweed rape or beat people if they leave. And even here, China's diplomacy has played a part.
The Sudanese official charged with the welfare of the people in Darfur's camps is the very same man accused of committing the worst crimes against them, the very same crimes that drove the people to the camps in the first place. His name is Ahmed Haroun, and diplomatically, China has helped protect him from arrest.
Ahmed Haroun, one of the first to be named a war criminal in Darfur, is accused of arming the Janjaweed and ordering large-scale killings in 2003 and 4. We were told that the mass graves of those whose killings he ordered lay beyond these hills. The court says Haroun is still part of the government network that decides where the Janjaweed deploy, and the Janjaweed are all around Kalma camp.
Haroun is responsible of the suffering of the people in the camps. Is responsible of the lack of food, the lack of humanitarian aid, the malnutrition rate, the people who are dying for starvation. Is responsible of the women who are raped as soon as they leave the camps. Is responsible of the men who are killed as soon as they leave the camps.
In December, China stopped a UN statement calling for Ahmed Haroun to be brought to justice. America, Brazil and others also haven't consistently supported efforts to arrest Darfur's named war criminals. Under pressure, China finally agreed last month that Darfur's war crimes should be dealt with, but then said punishment in Darfur cannot be rushed. The women of Kalma do what they have to. They leave the camp to collect firewood so they can cook their food. A group of women left the camp on May 5th. This is what happened to 10 of them.
7 Janjaweed chased us. We didn't manage to escape. They held us and beat us. After that, they raped us, and I fell down and injured myself. I suffer from my injuries. I haven't felt well for 15 days. Emotionally, I'm feeling very bad. How can I have been raped?
Darfur is a land where killers roam free. China is arming the killers, and it's helped defend them. The Chinese government wouldn't comment, when we told them about the evidence we'd gathered.
Hilary Anderson reporting, and we've handed all the evidence gathered by her and her team to the UN panel of experts on Darfur. They have said that they will examine it. And the International Criminal Court, which today heard the charges against Sudan's president, has requested our footage. Also, we'll be reporting from inside China before the games begin. Next week, how can Gordon Brown lecture the world on climate change while backing a third runway at Heathrow? Not without his government cynically fixing the figures, say the critics.